there has been a sort of glimmer of optimism in the talks between Ukraine and Russia. President Zelensky of Ukraine suggesting that concrete topics were now being discussed rather than just issuing one another with ultimatums. Tim, I want to bring you in on this first of all. What do we understand anything more about what these concrete topics, is how President Zelensky described it, what these may be?
Well, we only have the outline, and I'm not arguing that peace is about to break out on Monday or even a ceasefire, but
Sure.
but over the past week, the outline has very, very faintly emerged. I mean, the Ukrainian maximalist and completely defensible and understandable demand is leave.
Yeah. Yes.
On the other side, the maximalist demand is you must recognize Crimea as Russia. You must recognize that the two breakaway so-called republics are independent statelets, and you must agree you will never join NATO. So that's not acceptable to Zelensky, but a couple of things have happened. One, you've just said what Zelensky said. Putin's spokesman said during the week, I think it was Dmitry Peskov, that Putin is at some point prepared to meet Zelensky, whereas before he was calling him a neo-Nazi who had to be replaced. And then you had it went up to foreign minister level. Erdogan put the two foreign ministers together in Turkey. And then you've had Bennett of Israel actually going to Moscow. So take that maximalist demand of Putin's. I think the one thing that Zelensky can give is Crimea, because it's de facto Russia anyway, if not de jure. The republics, you can offer semi-autonomy. Not joining NATO is very difficult, but you can start putting in things like, we guarantee not to have any heavy weapons of X. So what I'm saying is there is a vague outline and a lot of diplomatic work. And those three leaders I've talked about do what in the British politics we call Sherpering, heavy lifting. And when you get closer to it, in leans Biden with a whisper that we would consider lifting X, Y, and Z sanctions, not necessarily all of them. And in leans, and this is crucial, President Xi, who clearly not particularly happy about all this, but cannot say that in public. And he leans into Putin. So that's the very vague outline I've got. And I think it is moving extremely slowly towards that. But it depends on the fighting and what happens and where the positions are, at which point one side or the other says, right, I will give X.
Yeah, and Michael, in terms then of the direction of travel, I suppose, of these potential talks, potential compromises, and just trying to edge that dial ever closer to more concrete talks and resolution and potential compromise, at what point will Putin accept that? For example, is this a result of sanctions so far? And is it that sanctions will need to go further to tip Putin over the edge into a willingness to deal here?
Well, there are some inklings that Mr. Putin is aware that this war is not going as splendidly or swimmingly as he would have liked, and was told that it would do. Yesterday, my good friend Andrei Soldatov, who is a Russian journalist who specializes in covering the security services, broke a rather big story, which is, and this is based on sources he's got within the FSB, the domestic security apparatus, and one of the successor agencies of the KGB. Apparently, the head of the fifth service of the FSB, which is the foreign intelligence arm of the FSB, was put under house arrest, as was his deputy and I think a few others from that service. Now, this guy was in charge, essentially, of running the Ukraine file from 2014 onward, when the Euromaidan revolution broke out. It's a rather significant figure. And if Putin feels that he's been sold a bill of goods by one of his top spy masters, such that now he's going to take this guy out of the equation, well, that does suggest that he realizes he's got a long, hard slog ahead of him, which now I think even the military analysts who are predicting a swift fall of Ukraine are saying is probably the most likely scenario. And there's another problem. Logistics, supply lines, manpower, firepower, all of these things get worn out. All of these things you end up losing over time. I interviewed well, I should say one of my colleagues interviewed the head of Estonia's Foreign Intelligence Service a week ago, Maren, who said that he estimates that within 2 months, Putin simply just won't have the capability to fight this war unless he's prepared to put everything in the Russian armed services into Ukraine. And of course, you can't do that without leaving, for instance, your eastern flank completely exposed. So yeah, I think there is an incentive here for Putin to at least feel out, what's on offer in terms of some kind of peace settlement. And just one other point to add to Tim's. Look, it's kind of blasphemous when you go to Ukraine for them to say this publicly, but sotto voce, I've heard it a lot from very patriotic Ukrainians, including members of the Rada. Losing Crimea and losing the parts of the Donbass that had been occupied by Russian forces since 2014 wasn't seen as such a liability politically. Why do I say that? Well, these are the areas of Ukraine that historically have been the most pro-Russian. And so the Ukrainians feel that in a way, Putin has done them a favor by penning up all of their fifth columnists such that Ukraine could go on this political trajectory, this Europhile westernizing trend, which arguably is the reason Putin went to war in the first place, right? So if there is some kind of settlement where indefinitely Crimea and the LDNR in the east remain in Russian hands, well, yeah, Ukrainians are going to publicly object to this, but privately, this could end up facilitating what they want most, which is integration with the West.
Let's bring in at this point then Nikolai Petrov, Senior Research Fellow on the Russia and Eurasia Programme at the Foreign Affairs think tank Chatham House. From 1990 to 1995, he was an advisor to the Russian Parliament, government and indeed presidential administration. Nikolai, good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
Are you sensing a softening in Putin's position?
Yes, at least partly, but I think that risks are increasing exactly due to what my colleagues did already tell. So Putin's positions are weakening, but nevertheless, he should demonstrate that the military operation is bringing certain success, and he should justify what's going on there. So the threat I see is connected with the fact that if it's not possible so far to get whatever he wants, and he wants, generally speaking, realization of Minsk agreements, but plus something else, he should make more pain in order to present arguments which will be serious enough for Ukrainian side and for the West to take his claims.
Who maintains any influence over Putin at this point? Has he got advisors that will influence him? Is he influenced by other world leaders? Who is it that can actually sway his decision-making?
I think that the only world leader who is really playing this game is President Biden, with European leaders playing as moderators rather than real participants of this game. But if to speak about who is around Putin, who can give him advices, I think that now it's time for Siloviki guys, for heads of military and law enforcement agencies, but Putin is making decisions by himself, although he is asking for different advices. But now we see that so-called liberals or technocrats in Russian government do not play any role. Their role is to minimize extremely negative consequences which Russia already experiences due to sanctions, and that's all.
I realise his presidential term, I think, began after you finished as an advisor in Russia, or indeed to the government there. Did you ever meet Putin?
No. I've never met him.
Yeah. Do you know people who have worked with him and who are connected to him?
In past, it was much easier to communicate with them.
Yeah.
Later, and especially when Putin did self-isolate himself at the time of the pandemic, it became very complicated. And that's very important part of this story, that the system in Russia, political system, is very non-transparent. So it's possible to speculate about who can influence Putin and how, but now the situation is very different from what it used to be even 3 years ago because of Putin's isolation. It's impossible to meet him in person for those persons who could approach him and who could give him certain advices. So his entourage is very limited now, and there are more silent servants around him now than persons who can say him a word.
Yeah, I think it's Alexei Navalny, isn't it, who of course is in jail, the opposition politician who mocks Putin as the old man in the bunker in reference to how isolated he is. We've all seen the giant table that other people have to sit at, and people reportedly having to isolate for days before they're allowed to come into contact with him, and all of that. Nikolai, I just wanted to ask as well, in your view, for how long can Russia endure the really quite crippling sanctions that have been placed on them that are really undermining the Russian economy now at this point?
I think, according to different experts, in 3 months or even earlier, Russian economy will be over, if only not to soften sanctions. This makes Putin very limited in time with regard to this war in Ukraine. Not only there is Russian public opinion, which can change very essentially due to economic reasons and due to human losses, but there is the real risk that the economy will collapse.